Okay, so we will wait a few more minutes, then we will start. And the big news is that Victorian Sunday of podcast series now has their official publication partner. We have somehow managed to secure a publication partnership with Peter Lang. Peter Lang is a very renowned international publisher, and so we will going to run this series, and then we will collect full manuscripts from the participants, the selected participants, and then we will publish it through Peter Lang. uh, Welcome all to this brand new series of Victorian Sundays, and we have today Bhaskar Bandyayopadhyay. Shauli, would you like to introduce her, because after all he's your classmate?
Hello everyone. I'm Shauli. Welcome to Victorian Sundays, like every Sunday. So Bhaskar is my classmate. He is a PhD research scholar at the Center for English Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. His research interests encompass speculative fiction, science fiction, video game studies, and a lot of other things. Bhaskar, do you want to say anything about your talk today?
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. I have been classmates of both Shauli and Ritom in two different universities. I'm meeting uh, the third convener, Indranil, sorry, for the first time right now, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a fantastic. I have watched few of the videos that you guys have put out. It's been a fantastic series, and I really hope that I live up to it today. Um, as regards the talk, we would be, I don't know if we should start right away or we should wait for a few more people to join. So let me know.
We
I
can
think
wait.
we can wait for, 2 minutes and then start.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So I'll just introduce myself a bit personally, so as to speak. I I did my graduation from Banaras Hindu University in Varanasi. I did my post-graduation with Ritom at Delhi University. And now I am a PhD scholar in the same batch as Shauli. And if company reflects a person's credentials in any ways, I am in very good company. So I hope that makes me credible enough. Um, as regards uh, the talk came out of a very, one can use the word surreal without the baggage of the word. Surreal talk that we were having, Shauli, Ritam, and I were having quite a few months back about the entire arena of Brainrot that has come up, which is its own language, which has become its own culture, which has become almost an affront to the digital scape that we are now living in. To introduce that aspect of brain rot, digital humanities into Victorian studies has been a task. I will have to admit it has been a task. Um, but thankfully, there are researchers prior to us who have at least helped me join the connections a bit more strongly. But still, the connections are tentative as of now, and much research needs to be done around both brain rot, academia, and Victorian studies. So, whatever I'm going to speak today would be a tiny part of what I am thinking of at this moment. Of course, these topics would expand or contract or completely erase themselves altogether throughout my research that would happen. Um, so, yeah, should we start or
Yeah, I
should we
think we
wait a
can
bit?
start now.
Okay, so my camera would go off when I start sharing the screen. So there's that. I'll just start scheduling. Just a minute. Um, is the screen visible?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. So very cheekily, in fact, I have named this a well-wrought brain rot. Of course, the rhyme itself is quite on the nose, but it also is a throwback to Clement Brooks's work, A Well-Wrought Urn, for the new critics. I would not expand on it because I really did it only because the rhyme was very nice. but we'll right away go to how I have structured this talk. Firstly, we'll look at the history of brain rot, a slight history. It wouldn't be something too expansive. It would talk about where one of the possible origins of brain rot as a term or a concept might be. And then we'll straight away move to how the term is being used right now, which would make up the second section of the talk, which would be the characteristics. With the characteristics itself, there is a slight detour that we take to how brain rot is seen as an offense and also how one defends brain rot. So that would conclude the second section. The third section would be the literary considerations that come out of such a phenomenon such as brain rot. The fourth would be art considerations, and the fifth would be philosophical considerations. Now, the last three, literary, art, and philosophical considerations, though seen as separate here, do not particularly are separate in their considerations. All of them gel into each other, and hopefully there is sense to the madness that we are now embarking upon. So I'll start with the definition that Oxford University Press gave out for brain rot when it declared brain rot as the word of the year for 2024. It says the supposed deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state, especially viewed as a result of overconsumption of material, now particularly online content, considered to be trivial or unchallenging. Also, something characterized as likely to lead to such deterioration. So brain rot is both a phenomenon and also an adjective to a content that creates brain rot in the first place. One needs to be very mindful about the definition because the starting of the definition is already contingent. It is a supposed deterioration. The cognitive scientists and the work that has been done on brain rot and how it affects kids of the Gen Alpha age has been very recent and hence do not have the luxury of being peer reviewed thoroughly. They also do not have the bandwidth of a lot of other different considerations that need to be taken for a comprehensive understanding of the cognitive effects of brain rot. So that is the supposed part of the definition. Deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state is again problematic because firstly it assumes that there is a deterioration, as we would see that there are apologies for and defenses of brain rot, which would talk of how it is not a deterioration at all. The mental or the intellectual state again serves as a very, in all senses of the word, a very moralistic understanding of what a person's mental or intellectual state should be in a society that we live in. And we would be talking of this in the Victorian context as well. As a result of overconsumption of material. Now, the overconsumption of material, the quantitative understanding of overconsumption also plays a huge role in how we understand what brain rot is. To quantify the level of indulgence that we have in the digital sphere, be it with words like doom scrolling and zombie scrolling and gobbling mode, etc., etc. There is this sense of what is a permissible amount of digital exposure, which has been the talk of the town for a very long time, especially when it comes to new media. How much is too much? Considered to be trivial or unchallenging. Here comes the artistic consideration and the literary consideration that I would be talking about in vis-a-vis the understanding of lowbrow culture or low culture or high culture and such tensions between these supposed categories of criticism. And of course, the last is very easy, which is something characterized as likely to lead to such a deterioration. Of course, it is a content now. It is not just a phenomenon, but also a content. So there goes the first slide. Now on to the second. The graph that is here shows a historical usage frequency of the term brain rot. Of course, since I had used ChatGPT to generate this graph, there are minor issues with it because in 1850s rather, one needs to have a spike, which ChatGPT does not show here. But there is a spike, a very slight spike, where David Theroux talks of a brain rot that is plaguing England of that time. That is plaguing not just England, but also America of that time in his Magnus Opus, Opum Walden. Um, so that is the initial spike which corresponds to his use. Then we have a long history of not of miss of rather an erasure of the term brain rot. And of course, this is all contingent upon further research. All the research that I am showcasing you right now are all available in the digital sphere. So there might be analog copies of writings, be it fiction, non-fiction, which talk about the same thing, but which has not been digitalized and hence cannot be accessed by me as of now. But embarking upon it, I would make sure to look at other sources that are analog that haven't been digitalized yet. So from 1854, we go straight away to 2004, wherein there is some traction there. 2007, sorry, 2007 to then 2010s, where there is a steady rise in the proliferation of digital media platforms. And then 2023 and 2024, where there is an exponential surge, which makes it into the word of the year. Now, from 1854 to 2024, there is more or less 200 years gap. Of course, we are 30 years away from the 200 mark, 200 anniversary of the usage of this word by Theroux. But what has changed, and has anything changed as such? So when we look at the context in which Theroux was talking of, there is a lamentation at the insistence that the English and the Americans project on having a singular interpretation of any text. They wish the world to dumb down to their level. He cites the example of Kabir's works having 4 different senses, which would raise complaints of complexity and inaccessibility in the 2 countries. Theroux professes not just a physical flânery, but an intellectual wandering too. So the entire book that Theroux writes, he talks of the divide between the urban and the natural. He talks about the artificial, the machine, the natural, the human, and how there needs to be a constant flux between both. It is not just nature worship. It is to always be in a sense of instability, to always be in a sense of wandering, to always wonder and wander at the same time. So the initial understanding of brain rot as something that is synonymous with the potato rot that was going on in England raises questions of a different sort, raises philosophical or critical theorist questions of what it means to be post-human, inhuman, non-human, along with what it means to rot, what it means to decay. I'm not going to go into the understanding of decay here because that would lead us to a completely different path that would go around to post-humanism, then to Donna Haraway and other writers as such. But here, it needs to be understood that it is seen as an ailment. It is seen as an ailment of cognitive faculties, of intellectual faculties, of mental faculties, and in a sense of social faculties as well. So Theroux is challenging that notion of asking for a dumbed down version of stuff, or asking for a lessened complexity in understanding or interpreting texts as such. In 2023 and 24, brain rot now has taken perhaps not a different, but an extended understanding of what it means to have this ailment of sorts. To have something that is dumb, to have something that is cringe, to have something that is not intellectually permissible, also brings into question how these categories are formed, apart from the genuine concerns that brain rot raises in both parenthood, in both and also and surveillance, from the government's point of view and the parents' point of view. Also to be noted are the parallels between the government and the parent as an authoritarian body in this context, which we will explore after the historical context of this entire phenomenon. Now, if we go to the next slide, we do see how Victorian England did not just allow itself the luxury of high literature vis-a-vis Dickens and others. Victorian literature also has the underbelly of these pamphlet-like books, these penny dreadfuls they were called, which came from a long lineage of chapbooks and yellow books. Chapbooks started in, I think, in the 14th century, wherein you have bards and traveling minstrels talk about their performances in bits and pieces of paper that were handed out to people. And that tradition of handing out to people these bits and pieces of literature, not in the sense of fine writing, but in a sense of bad writing or in a sense of parallel writing. That is not high culture, but rather relatable, rather something that would give you the romance of the adventure that the yellow books later, or yellow backs later on would give, vis-a-vis Treasure Island and other writings, adventure literature. So penny dreadfuls become a very nice precedent to brain rot, wherein you have the same concerns about these books that now people are showing up with when it comes to brain rot. Here we have a wonderful quote that I have taken from the Fortnightly Review, which was published in November 1895, which talks of how it has become a social evil. Penny dreadful has become a social evil which needs to be combated by the legislature itself. The quote goes, "We consider that the legislature should take some steps to put a stop to the inflammable and shocking literature that is sold, which we are of opinion leads to many a dreadful crime being carried out." And this was done in the wake of a murder by two brothers of a chimney sweeper, if I'm not wrong, in the same year. And we see that there is a very tenuous connection being made with literature and social action. And most importantly, a moral connection being made between a lowbrow literature like Penny Dreadful and the social evil of murder in the realm of children's literature, in the realm of children being influenced by the so-called evil of Penny Dreadfuls. To combat such criticism of Penny Dreadful, you have another quote that comes in the same very year, which says, "The classics on the moral side are no better than they ought to be, yet they are studied in our schools and colleges, are lauded by critics and professors, and generally understood to be beneficial in their influence, while the Penny Dreadful, which we are told is not immoral, is generally condemned." So now, while it is being projected as immoral, of course, with the intervention of the church and the intervention of local pastors, who, in a sense, are allowing Penny Dreadfuls to run amok, because Penny Dreadfuls, while serving the fantastical hunger of the working class, also are helping in the literacy rates of these people. So the flip side of Penny Dreadful as an evil doer of crime, as an evil influence of children and the working class, is that it is also helping with the literacy. During the Victorian era, one of the projected figures is, due to these books, these pamphlets, these magazines rather, literacy went up to 97%. So there is this idea of how lowbrow literature can penetrate these echo chambers of illiteracies, ignorances, much better than high culture literature can. And this is going to be one of the apologies that brain rot defenders would give later on. So here the pictures that I have shown is one of Sweeney Todd, which has now become a cultural icon, the demon barber of Baker Street, if I'm not wrong. And you have Varney the Vampire, or the Feast of Blood, which have very gory, bloody, graphic stories of murder, of kidnapping, of sodomy, of cuckoldry, all of these things that are going out, and people are enjoying this. So it has become it has given a sense of camaraderie to the working class in their shared understanding of literature. There has been incidents which have been accounted for in books on Victorian studies, which talk about how there used to be these parallel coffee houses, or rather these parallel meetups where people of the working class community who could read would gather people around and would read out these penny dreadfuls to them so that they could also enjoy this thrill of adventure. I think I'm already behind time, am I not?
No, no, you can carry on. It's all right.
Perfect. Thank you. So, yeah, after the historical understanding of it, I'll go to the next section, which will be brain rot behavior and its apologies. So, on your left, you would find the various problems that brain rot behavior poses to the social, mental, intellectual, cognitive health of its consumers. And to the right, you will face the apologies that are given to such a phenomena, to such a behavior. So you have the factors that contribute to the recognition of brain rot among adults, which will be excess screen time, addiction to social networking, cognitive overload, and then the digital behaviors that are associated to brain rot. Doom scrolling, zombie scrolling, social media engagement loops, emotional and cognitive control in digital behavior, and then you have the impact on the cognitive functions in adolescence. You have distorted memory, you have brain fog, you have attention span deficit issues, you have problem solving ability issues, you have cultural and social considerations that come into play when brain rot is seen as an ailment. And then you have the effective strategies that might help us combat brain rot behavior as such. You have the regulation of screen time, you have the curation of media feeds, and one must also incorporate non-digital materials, a shift to analog, to go for books, to go to nature, to touch grass, as the kids would say, and me as well, and fostering social support and community engagement. So all this becomes a view that takes brain rot as an ailment. On the reverse, brain rot as cultural renaissance is also taken place, wherein you have the flow state argument, which talks of how if I am in a state of flow, if I am in a state of intense involvement with a productive activity, so as to speak, why can I not imagine, or why can I not experience the same state of flow when I am doom scrolling, when I am media scrolling? It can be the exact same thing. This calls into question the entire idea of productivity, of how time needs to be productive. Then you have the mindfulness agenda, wherein one must be mindful of their surroundings at all times, and doom scrolling does not allow us to be mindful of that. The very real debate about this is, why should I be mindful of a world that is burning? The world is burning. Let me stay in my delusion. Let me stay in this happy space that I have curated for myself, and the algorithm has helped me with it. Why not? And then you have the Victorian angle to it. If the Victorians were reading their novels, which were serialized and periodized over a long length of time, maybe years as well, they used to read them as soap operas, which would run 3,000 shows, which would have these episodes which would go on for 1, 2 hours, which was the TV generation of the 60s till the 2000s. Now, perhaps brain rot is our modern TV. Brain rot is our OTT. So the serialized narratives of Italian brain rot, wherein you have these characters, these anthropomorphized characters, which have very strong characterizations and histories and problems and stories. How is it any different than Victorian novels? We are not engaging in something that is completely unheard of. Then comes the philosophical argument of how Socrates thought of writing to be hampering our memory. So thank God for brain rot then. There is no writing involved. Our memories are fine that there is then. There is no chance that our memories are getting erased. It is only due to writing that we have given so much importance to memory. And if brain rot has no writing involved, then very well so. Then the cultural angle of brain rot, wherein every culture would have a different brain rot. It would become a cult. It would become a members only club entertainment. For example, if we have Italian brain rot, we also have Indian brain rot. We have in Indian brain rot, we have figures in the Hindi sphere. We have figures like the Ganji Churel, which have taken a staple of domestic child horror into the brain rot era. It has become an adaptation of the early shows that used to be there. The Bengali brain rot. Again, you have these figures, these anthropomorphized figures, wherein you find them coming into storylines with huge, huge, huge backstories. So there is this understanding of brain rot as cultural value, and there is this fascinating paper that was released last year, which talks of the skibidi toilet and the monstrous digital. It talks of how there is a direct connection with Baudulard's understanding of hyperreality and the skibidi toilet and the understanding of surveillance capitalism. So it's a fascinating read. I would ask everyone to read that one paper. And then, of course, when we talk about the absurdism and the surrealism that is there in brain rot content, of course, we are inching towards Albert Camus' understanding of absurd and how the absurd comes as a friction between we as humans asking questions and the universe not giving us answers. So this tension of the absurd can very well be mitigated if we just embody the absurd with our brain rot. We are just looking at the world as it is. It is absurd. So we have absurd storylines. We have stories where stories of cuckoldry, we have stories of cheating, we have stories of murder, we have stories of kidnapping, just like Penny Dreadful, just like our detective stories, just like erotics, just like any other highbrow literature professors, just like the elements that any of highbrow literature professors. So herein we are absurd now. Please stop me because now the three considerations are also there, and it might overrun the time. So let me know.
No, I think there is no constant of time when people are actually enjoying the talk. So if you want, you can go on.
I really hope they are because I'm going all over. But in the spirit of brain rot, I am going all over. So
Yes.
So when we have to take the literary consideration of what a brain rot phenomenon is, then we come up with words like cringe, we come up with words like pulp, we come up with words like trash, we come up with words like nonsense. And in the periphery of these, we have words like humor, children's literature, slanguage, and guilty pleasure. So the entire notion of cringe, not just as an affective understanding of uh, the body's response to something that is either disgusting, awe-inspiring, loathsome, fearful, or a mix of all of this comes into play when we talk about brain rot. Brain rot becomes cringe because it refuses the normative understanding of storytelling. It refuses the normative characterizations that we have seen right from ancient Greece, we have seen right from the mythic age, wherein we have these characters, we have the characterizations of these characters, the stock characters, we have trickster characters, all of these character elements that we have right from the mythic era of storytelling to now, brain rot refuses to indulge in them. Brain rot, in fact, challenges the notion of character itself. And in its challenge of characterization and character, we have the understanding of cringe, we have the understanding of pulp, we have the understanding of trash, we have the understanding of nonsense. So cringe becomes one of those facets. Pulp, of course, in the 1900s, right after Victorian era, we have pulp literature coming up. We have these books that are printed on not so good quality papers, which give it the name pulpy trash, which give it the name of pulp, wherein you have these short books heavily ridden with plots that go haywire, that go beyond the plot construction of Aristotle any day. Uh, and then you have it being linked directly to trash because of the highbrow, lowbrow conversation that was going around at that time when modernism comes to play, when then postmodernism comes to play, when avant garde comes into the conversation. One of the words that I would focus upon for a tiny, tiny bit would be the idea of nonsense, because nonsense has direct links children's literature and the Victorian literature that was published. Nonsense, the one of the father figures of nonsense would be Edward Lear, who was writing during the Victorian era. We have Lewis Carroll following in his footsteps and taking it further with his poems, with his writings in Alice in the Wonderland. All of these portmanteau words that they bring up, all of these nonsensical words that they bring up, gobbledygoo. You have words like I think one of the I think toad, the tortoise, and forgetting the name of this rather wonderful poem that was prescribed to us in one of our readings. So of Edward Lear, you have that. You have such examples of nonsensical writing, often affront to sense, often affront to rationality itself in children's literature, in the understanding of how children, the target audience of these poems, need not conform to the logic of the adult world, to the logic of the modern era. Linked to all this is the understanding of humor. So you will see children, you will see toddlers giggle at skibidi toilets. You will see them giggle at Italian brain rot. What is this understanding of humor that we are missing out? And when I say we, I'm not just saying millennials and boomers. I'm also saying Gen Z, uh, my generation. What is it that we are missing out? The generational understanding of humor, the generational theorization of humor, alongside the other theories of humor, be it Bergson, be it Zizek, be it the other people who have talked of theories of humor as such. What is it that we are missing out, that we think that we cannot understand? And do we have to understand? Does the entire notion of nonsense allow academicians like us no respite, because we as is our occupational hazard, have to rationalize, have to theorize, have to make sense of things, as I am trying to do right now. So this right now is an affront to brain rot phenomenon itself. This is not brain rot academia. Brain rot academia would be something that is so disjunctured, that is so difficult to understand. One might of course talk of the accelerationist movement in the 1960s and the 1980s, Nick Land's understanding of accelerationism, but those are different considerations that one must take. The understanding of guilty pleasure also comes into foray here. What is permissible by the social norms of pleasure and what is not? If I am not, if I do not talk of brain rot in a public setup, in in academic institutions, that means that there is a guilt involved in the pleasure that we derive from brain rot as such. Why is it that we feel guilt for something that is completely justified? And the idea of justification is also fraught, because if brain rot exists, it does not exist in a vacuum. Something must have led to it. So there is no need for a justification of brain rot rather than or a vindication of brain rot as well, but rather an acceptance that yes, this exists and let's see why it exists. Then the last, of course, I'll talk of Slanguage, which will directly take me to Victorian slangs and how Victorian slangs developed as a separate language away from the highbrow culture of Victorian novels. And there is this wonderful book which is The Passing English of the Victorian Era, a dictionary of heterodox English slang and phrase by J. Redding Ware. It's a huge dictionary. I flipped through the pages, and the words that seemed to be slang then have now become of common parlance. So the transition from slang to common parlance, of course, needs to be considered when we are talking about Gen Z slangs and Gen Alpha slangs. Of course, I have messed up Gen Alpha, the word Gen Alpha here. It's gain alpha, but then again, who's to say that that's not slang itself? That's the best part about slang. Anything can be that. So you have Victorian slangs at the very left, and then you have uh, two columns of slangs, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, which have the same meanings but different words. You have thick, you have gat, you have serving, mewing, eight, sigma, jail, negative aura, you have snatch, you have phantom tax, you have riz, and of course the riz has carried over. As the word itself should, the charisma of riz has carried over rather. So the Victorian slangs are there. It isn't that we live in an unprecedented time of slangs taking hold of our day-to-day language. It has always been a part of linguistic foray. It has always been a mirror to the society and society's interpretation of worlds, of imaginations, of desires, and of course, the underbelly of culture itself, the resistance of highbrow language itself, or jargon, as post Marxists would talk about very, very late on. So you have Drio Weird, you have Establish a Funk, you have Pod Snappery, you have Irksome, and you have others as well. There's I think Behindery as well, which has the same understanding of buttocks as thick and gat do. These word associations that we undertake in these slangs as such. So there is a table of slang here, and now I'll just quickly run through the artistic considerations and the philosophical considerations. So the artistic considerations, since it's an audio-visual medium, the artistic considerations needs to take into account the highbrow and lowbrow and the high-low culture debate as well. There is the production of these brainrot content, which needs to take account for the Gen AI, the generative AI aspect of art itself. If there is originality, how does originality work? What is the understanding of art when we come into brainrot content? If it is surrealism, is it surrealism if Gen AI is making it? If it is absurd, how is it absurd if it does not have quote unquote the human touch to it? Which the human condition is the absurd condition. So if it is absurd, how is it absurd if it is exclusively a human condition? Then the understanding of the sublime, and here I would not particularly go ahead with a total understanding of what the sublime with brainrot would be, but I would rather shift the entire discourse to Zizek's understanding of the ridiculous sublime. So Zizek's understanding of the ridiculous sublime, when he talks about the film, the lost, I think it's the Lost Highway of David Finch's. He has written a book on ridiculous sublime, wherein the sublime, even though ridiculous, demands devotion to the sublime. So if brainrot content can be seen as sublime, and if in its core essence it is ridiculous, is it ridiculous sublime? Does it ask us to devote ourselves to it? Does the digital behavior of doom scrolling, of being incessantly online, chronically online, become a sort of devotion? So these are questions that in my research I would be asking when it comes to the artistic consideration of brainrot content. Of course, cringe carries over from literary to artistic consideration. And then you have the question of the avant-garde. Is this the avant-garde of our times? Is it beckoning a new era? Are we at the precipice of finding out a way to interact with each other beyond memes, beyond the Gen Z obsession with memes and the millennial obsession with memes? So these are the considerations of artistic foray. And now I'll just, again, a very, very temple run sort of walk through in the philosophical considerations that one might take into account when we are talking about brain rot. So herein, I am projecting brain rot as a subsection of leisure studies, both in the sociology of leisure and the philosophy of leisure, and the digital behaviors that come with it. I'm talking of leisure studies because the idea of leisure, or the understanding of or the institutionalization of work itself, is an industrial age invention, which is closely related and, of course, concretized in the Victorian era. When we have laws which talk about how rest and leisure are important, that is where we find the emergence of novels more and more. Because now people do have the time to read, people do have the time to have hobbies, people do have the time to go out and wander. So leisure studies directly has a link with Victorian studies, and hence it has a link with brain-rot studies, as I hope to make clear with the words that I have used. The words that I have used, again, huge, huge, huge philosophical baggages attached to each of these words. I do not have the time or the capacity to comment on all of them in a comprehensive manner right now, but of course, I'll be talking of this somewhere or the other very soon as well. So leisure as something that is a primal need, or rather the biggest need, the philosophical and the psychological need of a human. If we are to chart Maslow's hierarchy of needs, perhaps leisure would become the top. When we talk of it in a philosophical understanding of the realm of freedom, wherein I am not just a worker. I am not just a hand on deck. I am not just someone who is a clog in the machine of the military industrial complex, as Marx sees the working class in Victorian England and Europe. So the realm of freedom becomes directly linked to this sublime leisure. Is brain rot and the refusal to work and the refusal to engage in anything quote unquote productive directly linked to this realm of freedom? Is my nephew, who is watching brain rot right at the age of 5 or 6, already experiencing the realm of freedom, which the military industrial complex will take away from him sooner or later? So that is one of the considerations of leisure. Then we have laziness, again, a fantastic essay, and the titular essay in the book of essays by Indrajit Hazra, where he talks about In Praise of Laziness. He talks of the Hindu mythical character of Kumbhakarna, and how one, if in that state of complete inaction, inactivity, is being prodded to work, works out a violence upon others. So laziness becomes this beautiful thing. And of course, Indrajit Hazra is taking into context the Bengali understanding of ghum, of lad, of these sublime nothingnesses, wherein you do nothing, wherein you're in a state of lull, wherein you're in a state of complete rest. Then, which completely, of course, Hazra talks of In Praise of Laziness as a continuation of Bertrand Russell's understanding of idleness. And Russell's understanding of idleness is completely in touch with Byung-Chul Han's understanding of inaction, wherein both of them talk about the idle mind as not a devil's workshop, but rather the spark of creativity. The idle mind takes in everything. So a brain rot content can give you everything if your brain becomes a sponge to the content that you're talking about, that you're seeing. If the content gives you the absurdity of life in its full force, then your brain, in a sense, philosophically speaking, becomes a sponge to everything that the universe has to offer to the human condition. The ideal brain becomes the best thing to happen to humans, since I think the wheel. Then you have Milan Kundera's apology for slowness in his book on slowness, that he talks of how there needs to be slow. Things need to be slow. We need not rush. We need not push ourselves beyond the borders of activity, of productivity, of everything that makes us human, which again links very nicely to Byung-Chul Han's understanding of inaction and lingering, wherein he talks about how leisure is not just non-action. It is not just a state of productive inaction, but rather it is a state of celebration. Leisure begets celebration. Culture is culture because of leisure. People do not go to a festival because it is productive. People go to a festival because it makes them feel human. It makes them feel connected. Of course, there is the consideration of the people who are selling stuff at the festival, who have the consumer production understanding of festival as a marketplace. But therein as well, there is this sense of, as Byung-Chul Han would talk of, there is this sense of connect beyond the product, beyond the desire to sell, but to a desire to connect through the product, through the act of barter, through the act of mutual love for the festivities and festivals. And the very last point, and now and I am running out of time, there is the idea of lingering, and I think which is the most important facet of the digital sphere. The idea of a flaneur, which came out again in the Victorian eras in France, wherein you have people who are traveling, who just like to travel as a as not just scrapbooking, but rather feeling out everything. To be a spectator to the beauty of non-participation is what a lingering person would be, a flaneur would be, a flaneuse would be. So Byung-Chul Han talks about how this culture of flannery is not there anymore. Wherein I would say that now we have come into the age of the cyber flaneur. We have now come into the age of the digital flannery, where we now have to look at brain rot content along with news of terrible news from all over the globe, right one after the other. We are now laughing, we are now crying, we are now doing this, we are now doing that. The affective state of confusion that the digital sphere brings us is the cyber flaneur. We are spectating. We are in this flux of confusion. We are in this flux of instability, which literature, right from the beginning, is grappling against the instability of the human condition and the world outside. So I think I am done. And yes, I really do not know what this means, but I found it out. And so there that is.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks a lot, Bhaskar. I think this is so far one of the like best lectures in our lecture series, and I'm like we are so honored to have you here. So, so I to have remarks on the talk. I mean, this is a fantastic talk. I don't think so anyone will have to say anything about it. So there are some points that I really liked about your lecture. Is that how you, I mean, through this example of the penny dreadful that we all are aware of, you kind of combine this. Concept like you created this carnivalesque of low literature and high literature, and how you showed that how the social morality was the social morality of that contemporary age was kind of subverted by a logo literature, and how this literacy that came through this penny dreadful, which is considered to be a very lowbrow literature, penetrated this entire echo chamber of literacy, and that is something that is very mind blowing, and I'm very grateful that you brought that point out. Another point is that I really liked about that how you kind of inverted this entire Maslow's hierarchy. And I think
Hmm.
it was a very funny and a very witty thing that you did, that you talked about Maslow's hierarchy and you completely changed it in a way. And now the needs that we thought and how Maslow's hierarchy arrange them, and we think of it completely differently right now if we take the aspect of leisure into consideration. And I also like that how you placed the entire idea of brain rot, which is seen as something very trivial, something that we are, as you said, that something we are made to feel guilt ridden about, something that we are told to stay away from. You placed it so brilliantly in this entire spectrum of leisure studies, and you showed that how it becomes a way that of liberation against the world of concretization, or this corporeal world. And I think that is something that was, I mean, that is brilliant. I have a question, I think, that I will ask you later. So now the floor is to the audience. If you want to ask Bhaskar any question, so you may raise your hand and you can ask him a question.
I'm very scared of this one thing is that when this recording eventually does come about on YouTube, I might be seen as one of those people who are actively pushing for brain rot, and the the generations afterwards might think of me if they ever get hold of this recording as I don't know. It
I
would be
think
like a
they're going to
naysayer of
think,
rationality.
I think they're going to see of you as a like a Benjamin's Messiah figure,
Sure.
showing, showing brain rot as a way of liberation and how rest and relaxation is more important to all of us. I mean, it's very important.
Exactly. So I wanted to ask one question because it was a great lecture, to be honest. And the question is not a real question, but like an observation. So, what do you think will be the future of brain rot? If I have to.
I think that is the best part about brain rot because brain rot takes the weirdest things in the culture and makes it into something that is so ubiquitous
Yeah.
that one can perhaps never formulate. And of course, this can be seen as an open challenge to the algorithm designers, who, the gods of algorithm, who might be uh, chipping away our brain cells by this brain rot content if I am to take the ailment angle seriously. But the understanding of brain rot as something that is so diffused because the human experience is so diffused. If I see something right now in front of me as a chair and put two googly eyes on it, it would become brain rot content. So the anything at this point can very well become anthropomorphized into a brain rot content, which I was going to talk of how now the problem of attention span, the problem of attention span and the disconnect that teachers felt with their students after the pandemic has now become a huge challenge to entire pedagogical enterprise is as well. So you have now videos that are coming up which have rewired brain rot into a pedagogy. You have brain rot, you have
Mm.
these videos which talk of learn this as brain rot, or you have these rather wonderful websites which change research papers into brain rot content to explain it further to people, to make it more accessible, which ties into my idea, ties into my question of uh, doing away with jargon as much as possible, doing away with academic jargon and the ivory tower.
That's a great explanation. Okay, we
Yeah.
have one question in the comment.
Paramita has asked a question. So, oh, Tirtha has also asked a question.
Okay.
So, Paramita is saying, Hi Bhaskar, lovely, hilarious lecture. Just a quick question. Since you mentioned the idea of leisure, I was immediately reminded of leisure or idleness in the Romantic era. Also reminded of it when you mentioned the sublime. Wondering why the Romantic leisure is not mentioned. What kind of difference does the brainrot idea of leisure or the Victorian idea of leisure entail in comparison? That is a very good question.
The very first, and this is perhaps, I think, the most blatant answer of it all. Victorian leisure was not
Yeah,
digital at all.
exactly.
So the understanding of Victorian leisure comes from an age of analog leisure. You have
Mm.
leisure that involved the body a lot. You had leisure wherein you were walking, you were playing sports, you were also pulling pranks on each other. You also had leisure where the problem with non-productive and productive work is also that should I call petty crimes as leisure then? Because Victorian era was full of petty crimes, and the laws were very stringent on petty crimes in a Victorian era. So does that work into the leisure understanding of it as well? The romantic leisure, of course. So there is this rather wonderful book which I was hoping to get my hands on, which talks of the romantic ridiculous um, in all its consideration. I think
It's
by
by
Rita.
Zizek.
No,
No?
no, no. It's by Rita J. Dashwood and Andrew Innes. So I could not get my hands on it right now. I have to ask for access later on. But romantic leisure was different than brainrot leisure because the romantic understanding of leisure was very nature oriented. They
Mhm.
wanted you to leave the urban scape, go for a vacation, live life amidst the trees, which is very interesting because now there has been a revival of the natural metaphor. When we say touch grass, what do we mean? We are talking of a romantic idea of leisure. We are talking of something that has to be that goes back to nature, a movement that goes back to nature, back to nature. So the problem, not rather a problem, but rather the difference between brain rot and other kinds of leisure, be it romantic or Victorian leisure, is that brain rot leisure is very self-aware. The name itself is self-aware. The people who are calling a content brain rot and still engaging in it know that it is brain rot, know that there is an ailment figure to it, know that they are not getting anything productive out of it. They are not getting any idea or any sense of calm out of it, or they don't want to get a sense of calm out of it in the normative fashion of the word. So there is a sense of self-deprecation here as well. I engage in brain rot, hence I am not as productive, hence I do not have that much of a social cultural value. So that is something completely different from the moralistic understanding of romantic leisure and the classist understanding of Victorian leisure. Uh, so I think that would be a comparison, but I would love to work on this more. And thank you for this suggestion. It's a wonderful, wonderful question.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, I think that answer question is very well answered. So we have another question, and it's apparently a very long question that Tirtho has asked on a train. So he's asking,
yeah.
your suggestion that practices like brain rot and the leisured immersion is so-called low culture may harbor subversive potential or alternative modalities of freedom opens up an important question. Yet, how might such a claim reckon with the Frankfurt School's foundational critique, particularly Adorno and Horkheimer's analysis in the dialectic of enlightenment, which posits the culture industry affects as systematic subversion of the aesthetics and the imaginative domains under the logic of capital. For them, the colonization of culture formerly conceived a potential space of negation and autonomous subject formation renders even leisure complicit in administrating unfreedom. Mass culture in the frame does not merely entertain, it pacifies, routinizes, and the forecloses the dialectical labor of the crucial reflection, thereby undermining the very conditions of the political agents of the historical consciousness. So yeah, this is also the question that I was going to ask.
Going to ask,
That
yes.
yeah, that mass culture, the according to Horkheim, Adorno and Horkheim, the mass culture that you were also talking about, and I think that brain rot in some sense also like television. Horkheimer and Adorno talks about television to be more specific, and then Friedrich Jameson also talks about it that how mass culture makes the audience and the recipients of this entire culture not as an active recipients but also passive recipients. So their entire idea is reduced that they are not they're no more active anymore. They're passive and also very docile. So they are just receiving that, and the productivity is not playing any role here. So yeah, how and they are also rendered as objective. Their entire subjective position is rendered objective. So how do you say? I mean, this is very contrary to this idea of brain rot as a way of liberation. So how do you see that?
I do not think of it as contrary if we consider, and it would be a very perverse logic to use here, which I am very happy to use when we're talking about brain rot. But the perverse logic of accelerationism is
Right.
perfectly understandable when we take into consideration the question that Tirthu asks. If there is this value oriented uh, ask